Well, welcome to Convos on the Couch. Tom Reardon here, talking to some of the great leaders in business today. I've got Vu Tran with me, fellow board member on People In, which is great, and also Vu's a doctor and still practicing doctor, and he's gone through a few different journeys, but was the co-founder of Go One, which is the largest learning platform worldwide, valued at between $2 and $3 billion. An unbelievable business, and now has moved on to designing rockets with Black Sky Industry. Fair journey there, mate. No.
Never a dull day, but thank you for having me.
No, welcome on board. So you've been in the education space, obviously still in the medicine area, and now in the defence. Give us the rundown on that journey, I suppose, mate.
Look, I've kind of fallen into the spaces, working with great people, working with people I know has always been important to me. I'd love to be able to say I engineered it, but it's not true. I started Go On with my best mates from high school, right? And, I hate to use the word pivot after all the stuff that's happened with COVID, but, we started off building websites for businesses when we were 16 years old. So we were the weird kids at school where, everyone went and got a job at Woolies or Macca's. We decided to register an ABN. Right. And so, after school, literally 2:55, the bell would go and we would grab our backpacks, jump on the train at Cannon Hill and go to, say, Stones Corner and just go door to door flogging websites. All right. So that's what we did throughout grade 11 and 12. And throughout that journey, we got to sort of the end of grade 12. And like any good business person, we said, look, let's take money out of the business. Let's pay ourselves for the first time. This is why I love People In, because it's full of founders like yourself. And so at the end of grade 12, we decided to pay ourselves, and we had enough money to pay for schoolies. So you work 1.5 years throughout half of grade 11 and all of grade 12, had enough money to pay for schools. And we thought, let's do the math on how much we were paid an hour. Somewhere between 40 and 50 cents an hour is how much we got paid. So well below the minimum wage. But what it did do is it taught us to sell, and it taught us to think about how do we care for our customers, or how do we have customers in the first place. I say to people, when you're growing a business, luck plays a massive role. We happen to be building a high-growth online training company focused on the workplace, and then COVID occurs, right?
Yeah.
So right place, right time, right type of business. And then it just took off from there. And so Go On today has just under 1,000 people globally across 22 countries. Every second of every hour of every day, about 3 or 4 people learning something new. So in time we'll have this conversation, we'll probably train 4,000 or 5,000 people or something like that, right? So as the company grew, I kind of started to think, well, what are the things that are important to me and what are the things I really enjoy doing? And what I realized is that I'm not made to manage a large organization. I could never do your role, right? But what I did find is that I love being at the coalface. I love building things, So I say to people, I did my own version of Eat, Pray, Love, right? Wandered the wilderness and landed at guided weapons and missiles. No, what ended up happening was I have a good friend in the rocketry space, and I really love that space. I've always loved that space, and so the opportunity to do something new in a space I've never been in before was really important. And for me, whatever I'm doing, working with great people, has been the most important fundamental thing. Everything else, it's cream on top.
Yeah, it's interesting. What do you say to barbecues? I'm a rocket designer now. Like,
I'm not the rocket. The reason why one of the things that really attracted me to the opportunity to work at People In and be part of the board at People In is because I would argue that People In is one of the only companies in Australia that has a massive concentration of founders, right? And founders are very unique beasts. I'm biased, and I'll say so myself, is that we're hustlers, we're problem solvers, and we work incredibly hard because we've got skin in the game in what we're doing, right? And so when I'm at a barbecue, I always say to people, I'm a general practitioner by trade, but I also love working in all these different areas. And I think that's the coolest thing. You built your first business from scratch. And I love that. I love being able to build stuff from scratch because it's just your imagination that really limits you from doing things. Then everything else is a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touch on that luck you touched on before. I think, there's skill which can be learned. There's luck that comes along, but I think there's that one fact, that mongrel factor, I think, 100%. That people don't talk about. Like with startups or business owners, it's that mongrel factor where you're going to lose at some stage, but it's whether you bounce back the next day. Yeah, it's just that passion to be able to bounce back no matter what happens and keep cracking on.
And when our back's against the wall, that's what brings out the best in us, right? Like, I think about, the sort of the journey I've been on, and I don't remember many of the wins, but I do remember the real crap times.
Yeah,
the times where...
Everyone remembers that.
Everyone remembers it. And that's what you learn from. And when you talk to founders who are, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years behind you, and you go, mate, been there, right? And I might not be able to solve your problem, but I can tell you you'll get through it because you'll figure it out, right? There are so many things when you start a business and you're growing a business that you've never done before. And the most amazing thing is if you're still standing, it means you've figured it out.
Yeah, and you've been in those different industries. Like, what's some of the hardest decisions you've had to make in those industries? Because they're very diverse.
Ironically, people, right? And I'm not just saying this because of the conversation we're having here. All businesses come down to people. We will reach the stage where you'll have a $1 billion company that's founded by one person at some stage because of AI. But right here, right now, today, I guarantee you, if there is anyone who is in business right now, who is watching this, who is running a business, who has grown a business, they will tell you that one of the most time-consuming and one of the most challenging things and one of the most integral things to them succeeding or failing is people. That's finding great people, that's managing great people, that's leading great people. And it's even about getting rid of great people, right, at the right place and the right time. And so for me, at different stages of the business, we had different challenges. The challenges you have in a 4-man team versus a 1,000-man team is very, very different. But some of the key topics are always the same. How do I get the best out of my leadership team? How do I get the best out of my team, right? One of the things that I've spent about 3 and a bit years in defence now, so I'm still very green to the space, but I love being able to talk to these military leaders because you look at it and you go, holy cows, these men and women in leadership positions in the military deal with the exact same problems that we deal with in the corporate world and in the startup world. And the principles of managing people is so difficult. Mm. And the ones that do it well, they've discovered alchemy, right? They've figured out how to turn that lead into gold. They've figured out how to get the most out of the team. It's one of those things that I feel like I'm always learning about. And the one curveball that life will always throw at you when you're running a business, no matter how much of a great formula you have, it's going to be around people. Yeah. There'll always be something.
And finding people that are passionate about what they do. Like
hugely.
At the end of the day, people go, right, go and find something that you're passionate about. But people don't know what they're passionate about. Like you don't step out of, for example, university and go, well, I want to be a recruiter. Like
No.
It's not in your DNA. It's people need to find something they're passionate about and then follow through on that, because it makes it life easier for yourself as leading those people, because they want to be there, they want to drive in the same direction that you want to drive.
I'll share with you something really interesting that we've done at Black Sky, right? So in Black Sky, where we focus on defence and aerospace, one of the things I always wanted to do was divorce HR from people and culture. And so what we did was we brought on an ex-Navy captain who was a former head of innovation for Navy or led innovation in Navy, and he joined our team part-time, and we gave him the role called Mentor-in-Chief. We call him the Mick, right? Now, his job is not to help you as an engineer become a better engineer. That's what your line manager will do. His job is to develop you as a person, right? So Steve's job is to work with you throughout your time with us at Black Sky, whether that's 6 months, 6 years, or 60 years, to be able to help you be a better person when you leave than when you join. And by better person, I don't mean from a morals and values point of view, but in terms of, like you said before, understand what you want, right? So one of the really interesting things, I'll give you an example, is when it comes to attrition, right, and team members leaving. One of the things that we often talk to Steve around is the concept of self-selection. So people realising whether or not this team and this company is right for them or not, having that being self-realised rather than, I don't know, performance improvement plans and all that stuff that you
and understanding that no role's perfect. those hard things that you need to do every day that you probably don't like. But if you can find the ones that you're passionate about and there's purpose and all the rest of it.
Well, I think about like evolution, right? Evolution doesn't occur due to perfection. Evolution occurs due to adversity, right? You know, you got some lizard in the desert and there's 10 of them and they're slightly different, and environmental conditions change and they get really crap. And 9 of them die and 1 survives. And it wasn't because that one was perfect. It was because that one was made to survive in those conditions.
Yeah.
And that wasn't because it was the best, you know, it had the best. It was just because, 1, luck, right place, right time. But 2, it just happened to be the thing that suited those conditions. And I think about that all the time because, you know, I've got young kids and I think about the world they're going to grow up in. And, you know, for me, I want them to get as many experiences as possible. It's kind of like, you know, sport. I know you love your sport. I want my kids to pick up every single ball and racket and paddle in the world. And then hopefully, just through throwing spaghetti at the wall, they'll find what sticks and what they enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, that for me is such a good analogy for just life, work, relationships, all those sorts of things to really try and figure out what is right. Because if I can put it to you the other way, you know, as a doctor, my mate's from medical school, from university, right? When you go into medical school, your life is pretty much planned for the next 60 years, plus or minus 1 or 2 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Your choice is, do you want to become a physician or a surgeon? If you're a surgeon, do you want to work on bones or do you want to work on organs? Right? Like, you know, like it's this tree diagram that doesn't shift very much at all. And I like to say to my friends that, you know, now that they've all finished their specialty training, what they do today will probably be the same thing they'll do in 40 years' time. Right? There's not much movement there. But what I find really interesting is as they're working their way through their careers, they all reach the point now where they'll go, well, what else is there? What more could I be doing beyond just my work as a doctor and in medicine? Because I think as humans, we're naturally curious. You know, we're naturally curious. We want to go, well, what else is out there?
Yep.
Right?
Mate, tell us about, I suppose, where you've backed a decision and then realised you've gone down the wrong rabbit hole and you need to get out and how you manage that.
I mean, there are so many things that you know, I was saying before, like, you know, you don't remember the victories, but you remember a lot of the losses, right? Man, like, there are so many, like, as a startup, and especially if you're trying to build a global company as an example, right? One of the most important things is you need to go into the US. You need to be able to build a company that can sell into the United States, because then you're a truly global company, right? If you're just selling into Australia, then as a tech and software company, you're just an Australian company. So, you know, every startup in the tech space eventually wants to chase the US, biggest market by a country mile. I like to describe to people, I've been on the public record about this, we probably tried it about 4 or 5 times, right? And failed every single time. Well, every single time by the last time. Because there are so many things that we just didn't get right from the start. So as an example, if we are going to start, and I know that this is your experience from early in it, you know, at People in AWX as well, was like, if we're going to start a brand new office in a brand new country, we have to be there. We can't just go and hire a head of sales.
I lived in WA, I lived in Sydney.
Exactly.
I moved wherever we needed to set
I wish I spoke to you 10, 15 years ago, right? Because what we did was we said, you know what, we've just raised capital from venture capitalists, so let's just take this money and let's go hire a head of sales in the US who knows the market, and they can go flog our stuff for us, right? Except what people don't understand is that those people aren't just physically distant from the mothership. They're also emotionally distant. They also, that feedback loop coming back into the business, they might be 10, 15 hours behind, but they're probably 2 weeks behind in terms of information feeding back into the organization and how quickly you can move to respond to the differences in market dynamics in terms of customers, the product you're offering them, all those sorts of things. That feedback loop being 2 weeks kills a business.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I would say to you that I'm not saying this is the real numbers, but I'll say to you, when you raise capital early on, let's say you raise $1 million at, just to keep it round, a $10 million valuation, okay? Which means that every $100,000 you spend is 1% of equity, okay? We're going to do a bit of math here. Well, It meant that in our early days, every 100 grand we spent stupidly, we didn't incinerate 100 grand of investors' money. We incinerated 1% of our equity, right? Do you want to know what 1% of $2 to $3 billion is today? 20 to 30 million. So every stupid hire we made back in the day, where we spent 100 grand stupidly, we go, oh, okay, we hired the wrong person, great human, wrong person for our business, or we went into the US and we executed the strategy wrong. At a $10 million valuation, every $100,000 you burnt is 1%. And that 1% today is worth $20 to $30 million.
It's a big number, isn't it?
So that one hire that you hired and you held on for too long, for 9 months, instead of getting rid of them early on or whatever it might be, cost us $20 million today. Right? So that's the compounding nature of building a high growth company. But it's also the importance of valuing your time, your equity, and your money when you're building a business early on. Like, that is a really big lesson learned today, right? And it doesn't show until 10 years later, but it's one of those things where, you know, again, in our world in Go One, we raised about $300 to $400 million, right? So it wasn't a small amount of money. And you go, okay, great, that's investors' money, but it's not. It's your equity as a founder.
Yeah.
It's your staff's equity and the ESOP, all those sorts of things. So for me, what it really comes back to is the biggest lesson I learned is no matter what stage of business you're at, making sure you value your business, your equity, your dollars, your staff is super important, because none of that is disposable. Yeah. All of that adds up to something.
And mate, now in the missile game, or more so in the defence game, like it's high stakes decisions that you need to make, and quickly. How do you govern that? Like, how do you work with that?
There's a great book by a guy named Ray Dalio, and it's called Principles. It's pretty straightforward. Have some key guiding principles that determine what you do. So in organisations like ours here at People In, we have values, right? We have the way that we make decisions based on those values when it comes to people or even business decisions, etc. We talk about those things around the boardroom table a lot, and in Black Sky, it's no different. We focus on sort of, you know, three things that are fundamental pillars of safety, speed, and scale. And we, you know, Blake, our CEO, will always turn around, and my co-founder will always turn around and say, it's not safety first, it's safety always. So we're very, very cognizant of the role that safety plays first and foremost, and I know you've got familiarity with that. Everything else then comes second off the back of it. And so for us, it's really quite simple. We have to make these decisions at speed, right? So it's safety, speed, and scale. But if we don't get through gate one of safety, everything else doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so for me, it actually, having some really key principles on how you make decisions kind of really distills back down and makes it a lot easier. So one is having those principles for us around safety, speed, and scale. So can we do it safely? If the answer is yes, move on to the next stuff. Can we do it at speed? Because speed is one of the only things that differentiates us from the really big incumbent players. The fact that we're more mobile, we're more agile. And the last bit is, and it's going, yes, we can do this we can do this safely, we can do it fast, and the last thing is we can do it at scale. Because at the end of the day, if it can't scale, we shouldn't be wasting our time on it, right? It's cute, right? It's an interesting thing. It's a great PhD project, but it's not a good business. Yeah. And so we look at that in terms of sort of some of the business levers. And then ultimately, when it comes to things like decision-making, hierarchy is really important. So we have 3 co-founders at Black Sky, but Blake is the CEO. So ultimately, around the table between the 3 of us, myself, Carl, and Blake, we'll have a conversation. And he might say it's black, I might say it's white. And I'll tell him exactly why I think it's white and duke it out with him behind closed doors. But when we walk outside...
Bit of blood on the floor.
Bit of blood on the floor is always good. But when we walk outside, if he says it's black, I'm saying it's black. Yeah. And that hierarchy is something that I learned from Go One, right? One of the biggest reasons why companies fail, or startups fail, is not, well, A, they run out of money. That's the first reason. But it's usually founder conflict. Mm-hmm. And I find that founder conflict isn't due to personalities rubbing each other the wrong way. It's due to lack of clarity around how decisions get made and who's holding the bag when it comes to making that decision.
And 100% backing them.
And backing them, right? Disagree and commit, right? That disagree and commit means that you succeed together, you fail together, but at least you've got multiple brains around the table when it comes to solving problems and being successful, right? It's this quote, people will attribute it to Nelson Mandela or whoever it might be, is if you want to move fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right?
Yeah.
And that go together bit is the reason why, for me, I could never be a solo founder.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it myself, right? Like, maybe it's I'm lazy, right? But also, I could never be a solo founder because, having a team around you, as I said before, during the really crappy periods is super important, right? Like, it's something you underestimate until you've gone through hell.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
And mate, what's something you always hear from a business perspective and you go, that is absolute BS?
Yeah, on one hand, there's so many things that I think about. On the other hand, I think there's so much focus on strategy and not enough focus on execution, right? People overthink.
Getting in and doing the work.
Get in and do it, right? So I'm a big fan of experimentation, right? So I think one of the biggest skills that any business person, any founder, even executive should be really good at is rapid experimentation. Have a hypothesis, test it out quickly, get some data, and if it works, pile more time, money, and effort into it, and if it doesn't, kill it.
Yeah.
Like, that's simple, right? Problem is, so many people would say, you got to think of the strategy first. You got to think of these sorts of things. It's like, no. You got to have a hypothesis and test it really quickly, and then work out whether you need to double down on it or not. Because in the time it's taken for you to try and think about it, pontificate it,
miss the opportunities.
so it's gone, right? And that's, for me, is one of the biggest challenges, is the combination of missed opportunities and sort of overthinking things. So I'm not saying do things stupidly and don't think about it, but I think there's got to, and again, this is what really attracts me to, being on the board of People In and working with you, is that as a business that is founder-led, where we have lots of founders who have joined the business and become part of the business, we have a massive focus on getting things done, executing, right? And that's something that is a cultural thing. It's the opposite of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
That's probably the easiest way to look at it, right? And so I think this desire to always have a well thought out strategy is often misplaced without actually having a real motive to execute. And that's important.
And probably going on from that, where have you sat in a meeting where someone's done a pitch and you've gone, geez, that's a great idea, but god awful pitch to me.
I think it actually happens all the time, right? Especially when it comes to, I talk a lot to founders, right? Founders are not exceptional communicators all the time, particularly if they're technical, but they can still be great salespeople. And what do I mean by that? I've got a firm belief, and I've done sessions with the team here before, and what makes a good salesperson is not great communication skills or even great sales skills. It's the ability to understand the customer incredibly well and the product incredibly well, or the service they're selling very well.
And being persistent.
And being persistent, right? So there's so many times where I'll meet, founders, and they'll pitch, and it'll be a train wreck of a pitch. But when you kind of get past that layer and you see how passionate they are about the customer, the problem they're trying to solve for the customer, and the product or solution they're pushing forward, you see past all of that. Then you actually go, well, actually, there's a bloody good company or idea behind that. And that's the thing that really matters.
Yeah.
Because everything else can be learnt, right? I have a strong belief that, yes, some people are born salespeople, but most actually learn to do it, right? Like you mentioned recruitment earlier, right? A, there are some people who are born to be recruiters and they don't know it yet. But B, there are some people who actually learn to be good at it. If I could hire the best salespeople in the world, they'd be people I went to uni with from medical school. Why? Because most younger doctors today are exceptional communicators because they've had to be, right? Some of my friends are much better communicators than I am because they have to, because their job is to tell you why you've had a heart attack and that you need to have this surgery and get your consent for that. Their job is to earn your trust and prescribe you whatever the treatment is. And I guarantee you, you've seen a good doctor before and you've seen a bad doctor before. And whether you think they're a good or a bad doctor isn't based on their skill. It wasn't based on their ability to perform medical procedures or whatever it might be, or their knowledge. It was based on how they made you feel and how they could earn your trust. And so for me, if I could hire the best sales force in the world, it'd be my mates from medical school. I just couldn't afford them.
And you've now been in the defence sector for a couple of years now. Is there any sort of call outs that you think in that defence space? Like, are they, the defence industry as a whole, are they really struggling to, attract people from a recruitment perspective? Like you look at recent stuff that's in the news where someone can be given an honour award and then next thing they're getting strung up by the media and strung up by the public. Like, it doesn't really, makes it really hard to attract young people into that sector when you can see someone that's put up on a pedestal one second and they're torn down the next.
I think you're touching on something that is important, but it's changing, right? I think, if I talk about just defence industry first and not defence recruitment, but defence industry, we just had an election, right, earlier this month, and not just the two major parties, but even the Greens came out with policies around onshore manufacturing of weapons, right?
Which you'd never have thought the Greens would ever say that.
You'd never expect that, right? And so I think the important thing to understand is that I have a firm belief that, when you go into an election, the policies they put out there usually reflect what the feeling on the ground is. So if you read into that, the feeling on the ground is that defence is important. And I reckon Aussies think defence is more important today than they have in the last 20 years. You just have to look at what's happening around us, right? The second thing as a result of that is I think that it will become more acceptable or even honourable to be able to work in a defence company, right? So when I graduated when I started uni, a lot of my mates from high school did engineering and they all went into the mining sector, right? And some of them went into the defence sector to work for some large defence companies because it was cool to go work for a mining company and the defence sector. And then somehow towards the end of uni or after uni, it became kind of less cool or less okay to work in mining or to work in defence. But I think it's cyclical. I think it's coming back. I think it is more acceptable today to work in mining and defence and some of these key, crucial industries for us as a country because people are realising how important it is for us. So as a result of it being more, I guess, socially acceptable, even though that should never be the case of something being socially acceptable of having a job, as a result of that, we're seeing people more willing to work in that space. I think there's more respect and dignity in working in those spaces. And then as a result of that, I think younger people are becoming more inclined to be able to say, yes, I'm going to go do that. But on the flip side of that, industry is just rising rapidly. What's happening right now, Tom, is that you're going to see the global defence market, roughly in US dollars, go from about $1.5 trillion a year to about $2.5–3 trillion a year in the next 5 or 6 years. There is no industry.
Massive jump.
No industry in the world that is going to grow that rapidly, unfortunately, in the next 5 years, right? And so as a result of that, all the existing defence companies will not have enough capacity to cater for that need. And so what you're in a position of is all these small companies are going to start growing. They're going to need workforce. And as a result of that, there'll be people coming to meet that. And I think that'll be okay.
Yeah, good. You've spoken about you're a good leader, not the greatest manager, which I'd probably dispute that. But anyway, you know yourself better than me. But what do you do when people get stuck in the weeds, and how do you get them out of the weeds?
This is where I run into. I think it's both a good thing and a bad thing having a background as a doctor. Because I like to describe to people that, I don't know if you remember in the 2000s, there was a show called Thank God You're Here.
Yeah.
Right, where they open the door, right? The comedian opens the door, they don't know what's in front of them. That's what being a general practitioner is like. You call in the next person and you don't know what you're going to see, right? So dealing with what we call high acuity, so really challenging problems, but also a really large variety is something that, as a GP, I get conditioned to. So when I'm talking to my team members and they're in the weeds and they're in a rut, I try and approach it a very similar way. So first things first is, as a doctor, if I'm jumping straight to solutions, I knock out missing a whole bunch of potential problems there I don't know about. You come in and you say, I've got chest pain. I go, Tom, we're going to take you upstairs to the cath lab, put some stents in your heart and you'll be fine. Turns out you just had a crappy curry. Yeah. Right? So you can't jump to conclusions, right? Sometimes as leaders and managers, we're so eager to solve a problem that we don't listen. So for me, the first part of it is just being a human and listening. And then empathizing and putting yourself in their position, understanding where they're coming from. But I think the most important thing, and I've learned this through making this mistake so many times, is realizing that not all problems are there to be solved by you.
Surround yourself with the people that can answer them.
Other people can answer them, or sometimes it's genuinely, and for me, given my role in the businesses that I'm involved in, genuinely sometimes they're not problems I can help solve at all, or that can't be solved. And really all they need is someone to listen to them and to feel supported. Because supporting someone can sometimes be just as good as solving their problem, if not better. Because there are a number of times that you've probably solved someone's problem, but realised they didn't feel supported. It came back to bite you in the backside. I guarantee all managers have run into this. Well, look, Tom, I solved your problem. Yeah, but they didn't feel supported, and so as a result of that, you're back at square one, right? So for me, that humanising the experience for people when they're in the weeds is super powerful.
And from leadership blind spot, like, how have you spotted like some of your leadership blind spots?
Trial and error. Right, to be serious, it's trial and error. But also, part of it is also listening to yourself, right? You know, you mentioned before, I talk all the time about the fact that I think I'm a pretty good leader, but I'm a terrible manager. Part of that comes down to the fact that, I'll be honest with you, I hate managing, right? I'm the sort of person where it's like, give me a gun and send me to the coalface, right? Send me right to the front lines and give me some people to be able to work with. I can't be a general right at the back, right? And so for me, a big part of it is realising also what gets me out of bed in the morning. Because I think that also, the things you don't enjoy doing are also a blind spot, right? Like, I used to always think that I need to learn to be a better manager. And so I put so much energy on focusing on being a better manager rather than actually doubling down on the things that I'm good at, right? You know,
It's a great call out.
Well, you're sitting there going to a front row going, hey, I need you to run faster and be able to leap higher. No, we're not going to get a goldfish to climb a tree, are we, right? So do your job, right? And do what you're good at. And so for me, at the end of the day, I think it's, blind spots can be one of two things. One, an actual blind spot where you don't know and it blindsides you. But the other are the unobvious blind spots, which are actually things you might be good at, but you don't enjoy. And as a result of that, it actually ends up being a sticking point in your ability to succeed and be good at what you do. And unfortunately, that comes about with a lot of self-awareness. And self-awareness, I think, is one of the hardest things to try and generate. It's super hard because it's difficult. You want to kind of bury that stuff and hide it.
And continue on from that question, mate. What is there something, I suppose, some hard truths about leadership that people tend to sort of sugarcoat?
Yeah. Well, not everyone is born to be a leader. In fact, most people learn to. They learn to be a leader as a result of adversity, as I was saying before, not as a result of being good at something, but actually being really crap at it a lot of times and learning from it. I think leadership has a lot more, as I was saying before, about understanding yourself than it is about understanding others as well, right? If you understand your limitations and your capability and your ability and inability to do things, you then can translate to going, how do I use that to help other people? And the last thing I think is that people think that all leaders have answers and all leaders have the best answer or are meant to have the best answer, right? And again, I know I draw a lot back on my experience as a general practitioner, but I have people come to me at their hardest times looking for a solution, looking for an answer. And being able to communicate that I don't know how to solve your problem at this point in time, or I can't, it's a big step to feel comfortable saying that to someone. But then when you get to that point as a lead, if you're putting that in a leadership situation, me being able to say to you, Tom, what we're going through, what you're experiencing, or we're experiencing as a team, I don't know exactly how we'll solve it, but I think we've got a better chance of solving it together than sticking our heads in the sand or, you know, whatever it might be. That in itself could put you in a position where you can solve some of these unsolvable problems. There's this great book written by Peter Thiel called 0 to 1. And when you read it, if you read it, you could have sworn it was written today, except it was written in 2014, 11 years ago. And some of the things in 0 to 1 he talks about, and one of my favourite quotes is he talks about the concept that in life and in business, you have secrets or impossible problems. So when you run into something, it can either be a secret or an impossible problem. If it's a secret, your job is to discover it, discover the solution. Or the solution could be an impossible problem where no matter how much energy you throw at it, it can never be solved because it's impossible. And so I really love looking at some of these things as a leader as whether they're secrets or impossible problems, right? Whether they're things that more energy, more time, more effort will actually do something and move the needle, or actually we're just throwing it at a wall and nothing's sticking, right? And I think part of our role as leaders is to really try and understand what is a secret, what's an impossible problem, and whether or not we should be tackling them or not. Because also, over time, the longer problems take to solve, the more morale sort of wanes and the more sort of confidence decreases. And our job as leaders is to be able to give people confidence. I think that's a really important one.
I think, we've spoken about it before. It's that circle of influence, isn't it?
100%.
Can you actually influence anything in this circle? If you can't, well, why are you actually getting yourself tied up in a knot about
Acknowledge that you're worried about it.
You're worried about it, but let's go to where we can actually have an influence.
100%. The economy, where's the economy at? Can do bugger all about that at this point in time, but I can focus on what we're doing as a business.
Yeah.
I can focus on how we're treating our people, how we're treating our customers, the service we're giving our customers. And then as a result of that, we then focus on that. And what's really interesting is the more you focus on the things you can control, you start to influence things you couldn't before.
Yeah.
And that's super powerful. And I think that's really important. A lot of, I work a lot in the sales space, obviously, and my team often worry about competition. And I'll say to them, Tom, can we control the competition? No. Cool. So let's spend energy worrying about us, acknowledge that the competition exists and that they're doing these things, but we're going to focus on our game plan on the field, what we're doing. Same thing in sport, right? You got to think about your game plan and what you're doing.
Yeah. Now I'm going to hit you with 5 quick questions, okay?
Go for it.
And just whatever comes to your mind straight away. So let's start with worst buzzword in business right now.
Circle back.
Your go-to when you're completely fried at the end of the day?
Fishing.
Perfect. Love it. One thing you're terrible at that your team will secretly save you from?
Time management.
Your best gold nugget every leader should know?
It's that circle of concern, circle of influence. Read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You hear me talk about this all the time.
Yeah. The best thing you've ever read or watched lately that's actually taught you something?
7 Habits of Highly Effective People is one of the best things I've read. So, I'd definitely put it up there.
Yeah, perfect. Buzzword right now, worst buzzword in business?
Well, I think I told you. Circle back.
Excellent, mate. Really appreciate you joining us on the couch for a convo. And, mate, Black Sky Industries, it's going to be a phenomenal business, no doubt. And what you've done up to now and just your passion to still be, practicing once a week as a doctor is phenomenal as well. So really impressive leader that's been able to join us on Convo on the Couch. So thanks a heap, Vu.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Cheers.